My name is Kira, and it all began during my college days, a time I remember with a mix of fondness and regret. I was just another face in the crowd at our bustling campus, trying to balance my studies with a social life. That's when I first laid eyes on him, Jake. He was in several of my classes, always sitting a few rows ahead, his dark hair slightly tousled and his eyes focused intently on the professor. I found myself stealing glances at him whenever I could. There was something about his quiet confidence that drew me in. But as fate would have it, Jake was already taken. His girlfriend, Sophia, was a striking blonde with a bubbly personality that seemed to light up any room she entered. One day, Jake asked me for notes from lectures that he had missed due to illness. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I started talking more. We'd discuss assignments, share jokes about our professors, and occasionally grab coffee between classes. But every time I felt myself getting too comfortable, Sophia would appear, wrapping her arm around Jake's waist or planting a kiss on his cheek. "Jake, honey, there you are," Sophia's voice rang out one afternoon as Jake and I were leaving the library. "Oh, hi, Kira, right?" "Yeah, that's right," I nodded, forcing a smile. "Well, I should get going. See you around, Jake." I tried to convince myself that Jake and I were just friends, that my feelings were one-sided. But deep down, I knew I was falling for him harder each day. On our graduation day, I watched as Jake's family showered him with hugs and congratulations. Sophia was right there with them, beaming with pride. I stood off to the side with my own family, feeling a mix of excitement for the future and a lingering sadness for what could have been. "Congrats, Kira," Jake's voice startled me out of my thoughts. He pulled me into a quick hug, and I caught a whiff of his cologne. "Can you believe we made it?" "Thanks, Jake. Congratulations to you too," I said, stepping back. "Any big plans now that we're done?" His face lit up. "Actually, yeah. Sophia and I are thinking about moving to Italy. She's got a grandmother there, and we thought it'd be a great adventure." That summer, I threw myself into job hunting, determined to start my career on a high note. I sent out countless resumes, went on numerous interviews, and tried to push thoughts of Jake to the back of my mind. After all, he was probably off in Italy, starting his new life with Sophia. As summer faded into autumn, I found myself facing a new chapter in my life. After weeks of applications and interviews, I finally landed a job at a prestigious company in the city. I was thrilled about the opportunity, eager to prove myself in the corporate world. On my first day, I walked into the sleek office building, my heart pounding with excitement and nerves. As I was being shown around by HR, something caught my eye, a wall of photographs featuring the company's executives. My gaze landed on a familiar face, and I felt my stomach drop. There, smiling back at me from one of the frames, was a man standing next to Sophia, Jake's girlfriend. The nameplate beneath the photo read Robert Thompson, President. It couldn't be a coincidence. As I settled into my new role, I couldn't shake the feeling that fate was playing some kind of trick on me. I hadn't heard from Jake since graduation, and now here I was, working for his girlfriend's father. It felt like the universe was determined to keep Jake in my orbit, one way or another. A few weeks into my new job, I was grabbing coffee in the break room when I heard a familiar voice. "Kira, is that really you?" I turned around, nearly spilling my coffee. There stood Jake, looking as handsome as ever in a sharp suit. "Jake, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He grinned, running a hand through his hair, a habit I remembered all too well from our college days. "I just started in the marketing department last week." "I had no idea you were working here too." We caught up briefly, and I learned that his plans had changed dramatically since graduation. "Sophia and I, well, we broke up," he said, his smile faltering slightly. "She decided to stay in Italy, and long distance just wasn't working for us." I felt a mix of emotions, sympathy for Jake's heartbreak, guilt for the small part of me that was relieved, and a renewed spark of hope that I tried desperately to extinguish. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I fell into a comfortable routine. We'd chat during coffee breaks, occasionally grab lunch together, and commiserate over work challenges. Despite working in different departments, we found ourselves spending more and more time together. One Friday evening, my colleagues and I went to a bar. As the night wore on and our colleagues started to leave, Jake and I stayed, talking and laughing like we used to back in college. "You know, Kira," Jake said, his voice soft. "I'm really glad you're here. Starting this job would have been a lot harder without a familiar face around." I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the wine I'd been sipping. "I'm glad too, Jake. It's nice to have a friend here." As I went home that night, I couldn't help but feel like something had shifted between us. The Jake I knew from college was still there, but there was something new too, a vulnerability, a closeness that hadn't existed before. As the seasons changed, so did my life at work. I threw myself into my job, determined to prove my worth. My dedication didn't go unnoticed, and I soon found myself climbing the corporate ladder faster than I'd ever imagined. "Kira, can I see you in my office?" my manager called out one day. I walked in, trying to mask my nervousness. "Is everything all right, sir?" He smiled, gesturing for me to sit. "More than all right. I'm recommending you for a promotion. Your work has been exceptional." I left his office in a daze, barely able to contain my excitement. As I rushed to share the news, I bumped into Jake in the hallway. "Whoa, where's the fire?" he laughed, steadying me. "Jake, I just got promoted," I blurted out. His face lit up. "That's fantastic, Kira. We need to celebrate. Dinner this weekend?" I nodded, my heart racing at the invitation. "Sounds perfect." Our weekend dinners became a regular thing. We'd talk about work, reminisce about college, and share our hopes for the future. With each passing week, I felt myself falling harder for Jake. One night, as we walked home from dinner, Jake suddenly stopped and turned to me. "Kira, I think I'm falling for you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart nearly stopped. "Jake, Before I could finish, he leaned in and kissed me. It was everything I had dreamed of and more. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of love and career success. Then, on a crisp autumn evening, Jake got down on one knee and proposed. Then came the dinner with Jake's parents. His mother, a prim woman named Eleanor, eyed me critically over the rim of her wine glass. "So, Kira," she began, her tone deceptively light. "When do you plan on quitting your job? A proper wife should be at home, ready to start a family." I nearly choked on my food. I hadn't planned on quitting, actually. I love my job. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Well, I'm sure you'll change your mind once you're married. After all, we expect lots of grandchildren." Jake squeezed my hand under the table, but remained silent. I forced a smile, hoping this was just pre-wedding jitters talking. Our wedding day arrived, a perfect summer afternoon. As I walked down the aisle towards Jake, I pushed all worries aside. This was our day, our moment. "I do," we both said, sealing our vows with a kiss. The honeymoon was magical, but reality set in quickly once we returned. Eleanor's comments about children became more frequent and pointed. "Any news yet?" she'd ask every time we saw her, her eyes darting to my stomach. Months passed, and no pregnancy. I tried to brush off the growing pressure, but it was getting harder to ignore. One night, after another tense family dinner, Jake turned to me. "Maybe you should see a doctor, Kira. Just to check things out." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Jake, it's only been a year. These things take time." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but, well, Mom's not wrong. We're not getting any younger." The following year was a roller coaster of emotions. Despite my initial reluctance, I agreed to see a doctor. The tests were uncomfortable and invasive, but I endured them, hoping they would provide answers and, more importantly, silence the growing chorus of concerns from Jake's family. "Well, Mrs. Stone," the doctor said, reviewing my results, "everything seems to be in perfect working order. There's no medical reason why you shouldn't be able to conceive." I felt a mix of relief and frustration. On one hand, I was healthy. On the other, we still had no explanation for why I wasn't pregnant yet. When I shared the news with Jake, his reaction surprised me. "Maybe you should get checked too. It takes two, you know," I suggested. He scoffed, shaking his head. "Come on, Kira. You know it's usually the woman's issue. Look, let's just keep trying, okay?" From that moment, our once passionate love life became a scheduled, mechanical process. Ovulation tracking, fertility diets, and timed intercourse replaced spontaneity and romance. With each passing month, the pressure mounted. Family gatherings became an exercise in endurance. Eleanor, Jake's mother, never missed an opportunity to bring up the subject of children. During one particularly tense Thanksgiving dinner, she cornered me in the kitchen. "You know, dear," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "Sarah from our church group just became a grandmother. Her son is 2 years younger than Jake." I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing a smile. "That's nice for them." "Indeed," Eleanor continued, her eyes boring into me. "I do hope we'll have similar news soon. After all, a woman's primary duty is to bear children. It's what we're made for." I bit my tongue, not wanting to cause a scene. But inside, I was seething. How dare she dismiss my hard work and achievements? As the months wore on, I noticed a change in Jake. He became distant, critical. Nothing I did seemed to please him anymore. "Do you have to eat so loudly?" he snapped one evening as we sat down for dinner. I paused mid-chew, taken aback. What? And why is the house such a mess? Don't you have time to clean during the day?" I looked around our spotless living room, bewildered. "Jake, what are you talking about? The house is clean." These incidents became more frequent. Jake nitpicked everything, how I dressed, how I spoke, even how I breathed. Each criticism chipped away at my self-esteem. At work, I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but rumors spread quickly in our office. Whispers followed me down the hallways. "Poor Kira, still no baby. I heard she can't have kids. Maybe that's why she's so focused on her career." I felt like I was suffocating, caught between the pressure at home and the gossip at work. The confident, ambitious woman I once was seemed to be fading away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw another curveball my way. It was a regular Monday morning when I first spotted her in the office lobby, Sophia, Jake's ex-girlfriend from college, looking as stunning as ever. My heart sank as I watched her confidently stride towards the elevators. What was she doing here? As if in answer to my unspoken question, I overheard a colleague whispering excitedly. "That's Robert Thompson's daughter. I heard she's back from Italy and joining the company." The news spread through the office like wildfire. Sophia was back, and she was working for her father's company, our company. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind was racing. How would Jake react? What did this mean for us? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. Later that day, I ran into Sophia near the break room. Her eyes narrowed as she recognized me. Well, if it isn't Kira," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I heard you managed to snag Jake after all." I straightened my spine, determined not to let her see how much her presence rattled me. "Sophia, welcome back. I hope you'll find working here pleasant." She let out a cold laugh. "Oh, I'm sure I will. And Kira?" She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I always get what I want. Remember that." As she sauntered away, I felt a chill run down my spine. Her words felt like a threat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. Over the next few weeks, I noticed changes in Jake's behavior. He started staying late at work more often, citing important projects and client meetings. At first, I didn't think much of it, we were both ambitious, after all. But then the weekend business trip started, and a little later, gossip in the office. I tried to dismiss these comments as office gossip, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. It was during one of Jake's weekend trips that I made a decision I never thought I'd make. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd found in the yellow pages. "Hello, Hawkins Private Investigations? I need your help." The next week was agony. I went through the motions at work, plastered on a smile for Jake when he was home, all while waiting for news from the detective. When the call finally came, I almost couldn't bring myself to answer. "We have the information you requested. You might want to sit down for this." As the detective spoke, I felt my world crumbling around me. Jake and Sophia were indeed having an affair. But that wasn't all, Sophia was pregnant. That evening, when Jake came home, I was waiting for him. The look of surprise on his face when he saw me sitting in the darkened living room quickly turned to wariness. "Kira, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I know, Jake. About you and Sophia. About the baby." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, to my shock, Jake started to laugh. It wasn't the warm, kind laugh I'd fallen in love with years ago. This was cold, almost cruel. "Well," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You want to know the truth, Kira? I've loved Sophia all along. You were just convenient. A placeholder until she came back." Each word was a dagger to my heart, but I refused to let him see me break. With trembling hands, I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "Here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Divorce papers. I think it's time we both stopped pretending." As I walked out of the house that night, leaving a stunned Jake behind, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. The life I had known was over, but perhaps, just perhaps, this was the first step towards something new. With the evidence collected by the private investigator, I decided to fight back. I sued Jake for divorce, citing his infidelity and demanding compensation not just from him, but also from Sophia. It was a bold move, one that sent shockwaves through our social and professional circles. During the proceedings, Sophia's outrage was palpable. "You're demanding money from a pregnant woman," she shrieked, her face contorted with anger. "How dare you?" I remained calm, letting our lawyer present the evidence. To my relief, the judge ruled in my favor. The court ordered both Jake and Sophia to pay substantial compensation for the emotional distress and damage to my reputation. The next day, I received an unexpected summons to the president's office. My heart raced as I made my way there, fearing the worst. After all, Robert Thompson was Sophia's father. As I entered his office, Mr. Thompson's face was grave. "Kira, please, have a seat," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. What followed was one of the most surprising conversations of my life. "I want to apologize," he began, shocking me into silence. "What my daughter and your ex-husband did to you, it's inexcusable. I'm deeply ashamed of Sophia's actions." I sat there, stunned, as he continued. "I know this doesn't make up for what you've been through, but I'd like to offer you a fresh start. I've spoken with a partner company, and they're willing to take you on with my highest recommendation. And," he paused, sliding an envelope across the desk, "I hope you'll accept this as additional compensation for your ordeal." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope to find a check for a sum that made my eyes widen. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know what to say." He smiled sadly. "You don't need to say anything, Kira. You're a talented young woman who deserves better than what you've been dealt. I hope this helps you move forward." My new job was a breath of fresh air. Without the constant criticism and pressure from Jake, I flourished. My confidence, which had been battered and bruised, began to resurface. It was during this time that I noticed the company's owner, David, paying special attention to me. At first, I was wary, my trust in men severely shaken by my experience with Jake. But David's approach was different, respectful, patient, and genuinely kind. One evening, as we walked hand in hand through a moonlit park, I decided to lay all my cards on the table. "David," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "there's something you should know. In my previous marriage, we couldn't have children. It might have been me, I don't know for sure, but..." David stopped, turning to face me. His eyes, filled with warmth and understanding, met mine. Kira, listen to me. I love you. Children or no children, that doesn't change how I feel about you. You're an incredible woman, and I'm lucky to have you in my life. Tears welled up in my eyes as he pulled me into a tight embrace. For the first time in years, I felt truly accepted and loved for who I was. Just when I thought life couldn't get any better, it threw me another curveball, this time, a joyous one. A year into our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. The news came as a shock, given my history, but David and I were overjoyed. 9 months later, we welcomed our son, Ethan, into the world. As I held him in my arms for the first time, I marveled at the twists of fate that had brought me to this moment. Unlike my previous marriage, there was no pressure to give up my career. David supported my decision to return to work, and we found a balance that worked for our family. Life was good, filled with love, understanding, and the happy chaos of raising a child. 10 years flew by in a blink. Ethan was growing into a bright, curious boy, and our family life was everything I had ever hoped for. One day, while searching for some old documents in my email, I stumbled upon something unexpected, a letter from a clinic, addressed to Jake, my ex-husband. My heart raced as I read its contents. The letter detailed the results of a urological examination Jake had undergone years ago. It revealed he had prostate inflammation and cysts, rendering him infertile. The doctors had tried to reach him about urgent treatment, but failing that, had sent the results to the email I had provided at the clinic. I sat back, stunned. All those years of blame, of feeling inadequate, and it had been Jake who couldn't have children. A mix of emotions washed over me, vindication, anger, and a strange sense of pity for the man who had caused me so much pain. That evening, I shared the discovery with David. His response was exactly what I needed to hear. Kira, honey, he said, taking my hand. That's Jake's problem, not yours. You shouldn't let this upset you. Focus on our family, on the beautiful life we've built. It all happened 3 months later. The grand ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and the chatter of Seattle's elite. David, Ethan, and I had arrived at the charity dinner for the Foundation for Helping Children with Cancer, our hearts full of anticipation for a meaningful evening. I'm going to show Ethan the silent auction items, David said, giving my hand a squeeze. Will you be okay for a few minutes? I nodded, smiling as I watched them weave through the crowd. Turning to grab a glass of champagne, I froze. There, just a few feet away, stood Jake and Sophia. Before I could slip away, Jake's eyes locked onto mine. A familiar smirk spread across his face as he sauntered over, Sophia in tow. Well, if it isn't Kira, Jake drawled, his eyes roving over me with disdain. Looks like you've put on a few pounds. Eating away the stress of loneliness and infertility, are we? I felt my cheeks burn, but I stood my ground, refusing to let him see how his words affected me. Jake continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. It's such a shame, really. Here I am with my beautiful wife and our gorgeous daughter, she's the spitting image of Sophia, you know. And you? Still alone, I assume? Sophia turned to me, eyes narrowed. How could you possibly understand the importance of helping sick children when you can't even have any of your own? I opened my mouth to respond, but was cut off by a small voice behind me. Mom, who are these people? Why are they yelling at you? Ethan had returned, his young face a mix of confusion and concern. Jake's smug expression faltered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Mom, he stuttered, his eyes darting between Ethan and me. Before I could respond, David appeared at my side, his presence calm but commanding. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice stern as he placed a protective arm around my waist. Sophia, oblivious to the shifting dynamics, sneered. And who might you be? Jake, finally finding his voice, paled visibly. He's David Anderson, the president of Global Tech Corporation. The atmosphere changed instantly. Jake began to grovel, apologies tumbling from his lips. Sophia, enraged by his sudden change in behavior, berated him loudly. I couldn't take it anymore. Jake, I interrupted, my voice steady, I found the letter from the clinic. You were the one who couldn't have children. A hush fell over our group. Sophia's face drained of color, and she tugged at Jake's arm, desperate to leave. But Jake, his world crumbling around him, held her firmly. So my daughter is not mine at all, he growled. Tell me the truth. Trapped, Sophia confessed through gritted teeth. She had become pregnant in Italy by another man, then used Jake to avoid her father's disappointment. Their argument escalated, drawing attention from other guests. Eventually, event security escorted them out, their shouts echoing through the hall. Months later, we heard through the grapevine that Jake had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing treatment. He had divorced Sophia and was suing her for compensation. But for me, it was just another reminder of how far I'd come. I no longer dwelled on the past, instead, I embraced each day with my family, grateful for the twists of fate that had led me to this beautiful life.